The story started quietly, almost like a whisper lost in the background noise of space. A few people working in deep space listening posts began to talk about something strange. They said an unknown signal was detected from a region everyone called the Forbidden Zone. It wasn't a new place. That part of space had been avoided for decades because no one who went there ever came back. The area was filled with strange energy readings, unstable fields, and unexplainable silence. But now, there was movement again. Something big, something human. At first, no one believed it. People thought it was just another rumor that would fade away in a few days. There were always strange signals picked up in deep space. Radio echoes, cosmic dust interference, old satellites still floating around. But this one was different. The signal didn't match any alien pattern, and it wasn't random static either. It had rhythm like a heartbeat. When a few independent astronomers tried to analyze it, they noticed something impossible. The frequency used was one that only human ships had ever used, and it was an old Earth communication code, something from decades ago. That made no sense because no official mission had ever gone that far. The Forbidden Zone was beyond the last recorded human exploration limit. One of the technicians, working at a small observatory station, sat alone in the dim light of his control room when the rumor reached him. He laughed at first. He had been in this job long enough to know that rumors were a part of space work. People got bored, made stories, and passed them around to stay awake during long night shifts. But still, there was something about this rumor that made him uneasy. The signal was said to repeat every 22 hours as if it was waiting for someone to respond. He leaned closer to his monitor, scrolling through the data logs of the previous week. Nothing unusual. But just as he was about to close the file, he noticed something small, a slight distortion in one of the old signals. It wasn't noise. It was structured. He replayed it again and again until he realized what it was. Within the static, there was a faint pattern repeating at regular intervals. He increased the gain and slowed the playback speed, and then his heart almost stopped. Beneath all that static, a voice could be heard, weak but human. The words were hard to make out, but it was clear enough to tell that whoever it was, they were sending coordinates. He sat back in silence for a long time, trying to make sense of what he had just heard. His first thought was that it must be an old transmission, bouncing through space from some lost probe. That happened sometimes, but when he cross-checked the coordinates, his stomach tightened. Those coordinates pointed directly to the edge of the Forbidden Zone, the same region that had been sealed off by international space authorities years ago. He wasn't supposed to access that kind of information. Everything related to that region was classified, but curiosity had already taken hold of him. He opened another file, digging deeper into old archives, looking for anything that might explain what he just found. The more he searched, the stranger it got. Every time he tried to open a file related to that zone, the system froze or displayed an access denied warning. He knew he should stop. But something inside him whispered that this wasn't just a coincidence. He backed up the signal recording on a private drive before the system could delete it. Then he tried running a trace to see if anyone else had noticed the same thing. That night, while the rest of the observatory slept, he stayed up watching the data feed. Outside his window, the stars hung motionless, cold and silent. The hum of the machines was the only sound. Around midnight, the monitor flickered again, and for a split second, a new signal appeared. It was short, almost like a reply. Then it vanished completely. He replayed the logs several times but found nothing. It was as if the system had erased it automatically. That made him uneasy. Was someone watching the feed remotely? The next morning, he tried to report the incident to his supervisor. The man listened for a moment, then gave a tired smile and said, "Probably interference from a relay satellite. Don't worry about it." When he insisted, the supervisor's tone changed. "Drop it," he said quietly. "You don't want to get into restricted matters. Focus on your work." That phrase, restricted matters, stuck with him all day. He had heard stories before about people being warned off when they stumbled on something important. He had never believed those stories until now. Later that week, he received an unexpected system notification. The message simply said, "Unauthorized access detected. Data quarantine initiated." When he checked his backup drive, it was empty. Every single trace of the signal had vanished. That was the moment he realized that the rumor might be more than a story. Meanwhile, outside the observatory, the rumor had already started spreading through communication networks. A few space research enthusiasts posted about hearing an echo from the zone. Their posts were quickly deleted. That only made people more curious. Forums and chat groups began discussing it nonstop. Some claimed it was the lost ship from an old Earth mission that disappeared decades ago. Others believed it was an alien trick meant to lure humans closer. The story reached media channels, but official sources denied everything. One spokesperson called it a misunderstanding of natural radio interference. Another said, "There is no human activity in that region." But the firmness in their tone only made people doubt them more. Private groups began to analyze space recordings on their own, comparing frequencies, searching for patterns. A few of them managed to isolate a section of the signal that sounded like breathing or mechanical hums. It didn't match any alien technology known so far. The idea that a human ship might still be out there, lost, alive, or automated, sent chills down people's spines. For those who believed, it wasn't just about curiosity. It was about what it meant. If there was truly a human ship operating in the Forbidden Zone, it meant someone had gone there before anyone admitted it. It meant the truth had been hidden. As the days passed, the mystery deepened. Several research stations suddenly went offline for maintenance. Some said their equipment had been confiscated for upgrades. Those who had worked there spoke quietly among themselves, saying the same thing. Anyone who mentioned the rumor too loudly was called for a private meeting and came back silent. Back at the observatory, the technician couldn't shake the thought from his mind. Every night he found himself staring at the same star chart, his eyes drifting toward the empty space beyond the last known coordinate. He wondered what could be hiding there. Was it just a forgotten ship drifting endlessly? Or was it something alive, waiting for someone to notice? A week later, during a quiet shift, he saw it again. The same faint pulse on the monitor. This time it was clearer, sharper. He leaned in and adjusted the frequency. The screen filled with static, and then for a moment he saw it. A shape. A dark outline moving slowly across the data grid. He froze. The signal's origin was exactly the same as before, the Forbidden Zone. He tried to record it, but the system froze again. When it came back online, there was a short text message in the command field. Stop listening. He stared at those two words for a long time, unsure if they were real or part of some strange system glitch. But deep inside, he knew what it meant. Someone or something didn't want anyone tracing that signal. By morning, the pulse was gone again. The world outside went back to normal as if nothing had happened. But for the few who had heard, seen, or felt it, the thought lingered. Somewhere beyond the known boundaries, beyond the silence of space, a human voice had spoken from the shadows. Whether it was real or just an echo of something long lost, no one could say. But one thing was certain. The rumor had already started its journey, spreading quietly across stations, channels, and whispers. People began to wonder what else humanity had done in secret. What if this wasn't the first time they had crossed forbidden lines? The technician couldn't sleep anymore. He felt like he was part of something larger now, something hidden. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still hear that faint signal repeating in the back of his mind, steady and patient, like a heartbeat that refused to die. The Forbidden Zone remained silent to the rest of the world. But to those who knew, silence had never felt so loud. After that night, life at the observatory didn't feel the same. The technician tried to act normal, but inside he was restless. He kept thinking about that voice in the static, about the faint pulse that had appeared and disappeared like a ghost. He tried to convince himself that maybe it was just a system glitch or a leftover echo from an old transmission. But deep down, he knew what he had heard. It was human. He spent the next few days pretending not to care, but every time the data logs refreshed, his eyes went straight to the same coordinates, the edge of the Forbidden Zone. He wanted to check again, but the system had locked him out. Every attempt to access that frequency came with an unauthorized channel warning. Still, he couldn't let it go. He began working late at night, long after everyone else had left. He brought his own small receiver from home. A basic one, nothing special, but enough to pick up distant signals if tuned correctly. He connected it quietly to the backup feed line and began scanning the frequencies again. For hours there was nothing but static. Just as he was about to give up, the same pulse returned. Soft, slow, and steady. He leaned closer to the speaker, heart pounding. This time the signal was clearer. Within the noise, he could hear a broken transmission, a voice saying something that sounded like coordinates and the word return. He sat there frozen, unable to move. He replayed it again and again. There was no doubt about it now, it wasn't an echo. Someone was broadcasting from that region, someone who knew the human frequency system. He knew he needed proof. He recorded the signal onto a separate drive and labeled it with a random code name so that no one could easily track it. The next morning, he decided to share it with one of his trusted colleagues who worked at a different outpost. He waited until lunch break, when most people were distracted, then sent a short encrypted message to his friend. "Check these coordinates. Tell me if you hear anything unusual." A few hours later, his friend replied, "Signal received. Faint but real. Can't confirm source. Feels old." That one line was enough to make him realize he wasn't imagining things. Someone else had heard it too. But things got strange very quickly after that. The next day, a group of officials arrived at the observatory. They said they were there for a routine systems inspection. Nobody believed that. They moved around quietly, checking consoles, copying data from servers, and asking strange questions about recent signal interference. By evening, one of the engineers whispered that the visitors weren't from the usual space agency. They were from a department that handled classified missions. That night, the technician stayed back again. The observatory lights were dim and the room was silent except for the soft hum of the machines. He felt a strange pressure in his chest, like he was being watched. Still, he couldn't resist checking the frequency one more time. He turned on his small receiver and began scanning. Nothing at first. Then a faint pattern appeared again. But this time, the signal was mixed with something new. A low mechanical hum followed by 3 sharp beeps. He looked closely at the waveform. It wasn't random. The pattern repeated every 20 seconds, like someone, or something, was trying to send a message in intervals. He recorded everything and decided to analyze it offline. When he tried to access the data the next morning, it was gone again. Every trace had been wiped clean. The log showed corrupted file, but he knew it wasn't corruption. It had been deleted remotely. That was the final proof for him that the rumor was real, and that someone powerful didn't want the truth coming out. He started digging into old archives, searching for any clue about human ships that might have gone missing in that region. Most of the public records were heavily censored, but through an old data sharing site, he found fragments of a mission log from nearly 40 years ago. The project name was Helios. The file said it was a deep space exploration mission meant to study gravitational anomalies near the outer rim. It was supposed to have been canceled before launch due to safety issues. But what if it wasn't? What if one of the ships had actually launched without being recorded officially? He stared at the faded text on the screen, trying to imagine what those explorers must have felt, leaving Earth, knowing they might never return. Traveling into a zone everyone feared. The thought gave him chills. He spent the next several nights trying to piece together every bit of information he could find. He noticed that many documents related to the Helios project had been redacted or erased, but a few scraps remained: crew rosters, test reports, and one line that stood out more than anything else. Signal relay beacon installed for emergency return transmission. That explained everything. The repeating pulse, the old Earth code, the voice saying return. It wasn't random at all. The beacon had been activated again after all these years. But who activated it? Was someone still alive out there? Or had the ship itself somehow reawakened after drifting in the dark for decades? He needed to know. Late one night, he decided to record a message on the same frequency. He didn't know if it would reach, but he had to try. He leaned close to the mic and spoke softly. "This is an independent listener from the outer monitoring station. If anyone can hear me, please respond." He waited in silence. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then, just as he was about to switch it off, he heard a faint click followed by static. And then, a broken word came through, something that sounded like copy. His heart skipped a beat. It was faint and distorted, but the voice was definitely human. He replayed it over and over, hardly believing what he just heard. That one word changed everything. He wanted to tell someone, but he didn't know whom to trust. The authorities would only shut him down again, so he decided to keep it secret. He started keeping a handwritten log of every signal, every time the transmission repeated. The pulse now came regularly, every 22 hours like clockwork. Meanwhile, more rumors began spreading among the outer colonies. Cargo pilots whispered about seeing something glowing faintly near the forbidden zone. One pilot swore he saw a silhouette of a massive ship half covered in a strange mist. Nobody believed him, but when he tried to share his radar data, it mysteriously disappeared from the system database. Every time someone got close to the truth, the evidence vanished. It became clear that someone or something was erasing the trail. But why? If it was just an old ship, why hide it? What was so dangerous about the truth? The technician couldn't sleep anymore. He began dreaming about the voice, about a lonely ship drifting through endless darkness, waiting for someone to find it. Sometimes in his dreams he saw flashes of light and heard metal creaking under pressure, as if the ship itself was alive and calling for help. One morning, while reviewing the last data set, he noticed something strange. The coordinates had shifted slightly, just a few degrees, but enough to mean movement. The ship, or whatever it was, wasn't stationary. It was moving deeper into the forbidden zone. He zoomed in on the map, tracing the direction. The new coordinates led toward a cluster of abandoned relay satellites long thought to be dead. Maybe the ship was using those satellites to bounce its signal. He thought about sending a probe, but he didn't have the resources. He needed help. He contacted his friend again through an encrypted line. "It moved," he said. "The signal isn't fixed anymore." His friend was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "You should stop, my friend. I got a visit last night. People asking about you. They want to know what you've been working on." The technician's blood ran cold. He thanked his friend and ended the call. From that day onward, he knew he was being watched. He noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked near the observatory and new people checking security systems. Once he came back from lunch and found his desk drawer slightly open, though he was sure he had locked it. He didn't feel safe anymore, but he couldn't stop. Every time he thought of giving up, he remembered that faint human voice whispering, "Copy." Someone was out there waiting. One evening, he made a final decision. He packed his personal receiver, a few storage drives, and left the observatory quietly. If he couldn't investigate officially, he would do it himself. There were still independent communication towers in remote regions, outside government control. He would use those to keep listening. As he stepped out into the cold night, he looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, beyond the silence, was the forbidden zone, dark, vast, and full of unanswered questions. And somewhere inside that darkness, a human ship might still be drifting, sending out its lonely call across the void. He took a deep breath, adjusted his small bag, and began walking away from the lights of the observatory. He didn't know where the truth would lead him, but he was ready to follow the signal wherever it went. Because sometimes the search for truth becomes more than a mission. It becomes a calling. And for him, that faint, broken voice from the forbidden zone had become the only thing that mattered. The journey away from the observatory wasn't easy. The technician traveled quietly, avoiding attention, moving between small colonies and forgotten relay outposts. He carried only a few things: a portable receiver, an old data pad, and the small drive that held what little proof he had of the mysterious signal. He didn't trust anyone completely now. Every person he met, every conversation he overheard, made him feel like someone was always one step behind. But no matter how tired he felt, the one thing that kept him going was that voice, the faint, human voice that had said "copy." It played in his mind again and again like an unfinished sentence, like someone out there was waiting for a reply that never came. He finally reached a small outpost near the edge of the mapped sectors. It was old and half-abandoned, used mostly by traders who stopped to refuel before crossing deep space. The air smelled of oil and metal. The lights flickered constantly, and the entire place seemed forgotten by the world. It was exactly what he needed: quiet, hidden, and free from heavy surveillance. He rented a small room in the corner of the outpost and set up his receiver near the window. From there, he had a direct line to the sky. Every night he tuned it to the same frequency, waiting for that faint pulse to return. For days, nothing happened. Just static and silence. He began to wonder if maybe the ship had moved too far, or if someone had jammed the signal completely. Then one night it came back. The pulse started weak, then grew stronger, like a heartbeat finding rhythm again after a long pause. He leaned close, adjusting the dials carefully. Within the static, he heard something new this time. A longer message, broken but clearer than before. It said something like, Beacon active. Mission intact. Awaiting relay. The rest was too damaged to make out, but it was enough to send chills down his spine. The ship wasn't just drifting. It was still operating under a mission. He immediately began recording, saving every second of the signal. The words "mission intact" kept repeating in his head. What mission could possibly last this long? The Helios project was almost 40 years old. Everyone from that time was either retired or gone. If this ship truly was from that era, how was it still functioning? He went through the old archives again, piecing together everything he could about Project Helios. The deeper he dug, the more it felt like the mission had never been canceled. It had been erased. There were fragments of conversations, fragments of reports, and one blurry image of a massive, dark vessel shaped like a blade. Beneath the picture, the text read, "Experimental Ship Helios 1. Classified Trajectory." He stared at that picture for a long time. The design was old-fashioned but strong, built for long endurance. He imagined the crew, humans filled with hope, stepping into the unknown, trusting that someone would remember them. But nobody had. The world had forgotten. He started writing a detailed report of everything he had found. His plan was simple. Once he confirmed the source of the signal, he would send the entire story to independent networks before anyone could stop him. He wanted the truth to come out. But strange things began happening again. His small communication device kept showing short, unreadable messages. His signal feed began to distort like someone was trying to tap into it. One night, while analyzing the latest transmission, his screen flashed a line of text that made his blood run cold. "Stop tracking the Helios beacon." He froze. It was the same phrase that had appeared before on his old observatory terminal. Whoever was watching him back then was still watching now. He disconnected everything, pulled out the battery, and sat silently in the dark. His heart was pounding, his hands shaking slightly. Whoever they were, they had the power to track him across systems. He wasn't safe, but he had come too far to stop. The next day, he went to meet an old communication engineer who lived nearby. The man had once worked for the early space exploration department before it was dissolved. He was retired now, quiet, and preferred not to talk about the past. But when the technician mentioned the word Helios, the man's expression changed immediately. He turned pale and looked around nervously before whispering, "You shouldn't say that name out loud." The technician leaned forward. "You know about it, don't you?" The old engineer sighed, then nodded slowly. "We all knew about it. It was supposed to be humanity's boldest step. A mission beyond the mapped borders to reach a region no one dared to enter. They called it the Forbidden Zone later, but back then it was just unexplored space." "What happened to the ship?" the technician asked softly. "No one knows," the man replied. "Officially, the mission never launched. But there were rumors among the engineers. One of the ships, Helios 1, was sent out secretly, crewed by volunteers who knew they might never return. The government wanted to see if a human vessel could survive deep in that region. But after launch, the signal vanished. They tried to contact it for years, but nothing ever came back. Eventually, they closed the project and erased all records. Then how do you explain this?" The technician played the recent signal on his receiver. The old man listened quietly, his face tense. When the faint voice said, "Mission intact," the old man's eyes widened. He whispered, "That's the captain's code phrase. It means the mission objectives were never abandoned. They're still following the original command." "But how is that possible?" the technician asked. "It's been decades. No ship could survive that long." The old man looked down, his voice trembling slightly. "Unless they were never truly gone. Maybe the ship became something else. Or maybe it found something that kept it alive." The room went silent. The old man refused to say more. He warned the technician to stop digging and to forget everything before he got into real trouble. But the technician couldn't forget. He had already seen too much. That night he sat by the window again, staring at the stars. He thought about what the old man had said. Maybe the ship became something else. What could that mean? Was it possible the Helios had evolved somehow, turned into something beyond human understanding? He decided to trace the signal manually using triangulation. It took hours, but finally the coordinates pointed to a specific location deep within the Forbidden Zone. He zoomed in on the map. It was a region known for gravitational distortions, so strong that even light struggled to pass through. As he stared at the map, his receiver crackled again. This time the voice was clearer. Beacon active. Crew status unknown. Environment unstable. Awaiting contact, he felt his throat go dry. The voice sounded old and tired but human. He wanted to respond, to tell whoever was out there that they weren't forgotten. But he hesitated. If someone was monitoring him, his transmission could reveal his position. He waited for hours, hoping for another signal. Then something unexpected happened. The outpost lights flickered and went out. His receiver shut down completely. In the silence that followed, he heard a faint knocking sound on his metal door. 3 soft taps. His heart raced. No one was supposed to know he was there. He didn't move. The tapping came again, slower this time. Then a piece of paper slid under the door. He hesitated for a few seconds, then picked it up. It had no words, just a single coordinate written in black ink. He looked at it under the faint glow of his backup light. The coordinate matched the same region the Helios signal was coming from. Whoever had left that note knew exactly what he was chasing. He looked outside through the small window, but there was no one there. Just the dark hallway, empty and silent. He knew then that he wasn't the only one following the signal. Others were watching the same mystery, and maybe some of them didn't want the truth revealed. He folded the note and placed it inside his pocket. One thing was certain now, the Helios ship was real. It had launched, survived, and was still sending messages from the Forbidden Zone. The only question left was why. He took a deep breath and made his decision. He would follow the coordinates himself. Even if it meant crossing the boundary that no one dared to cross, he had to see it with his own eyes. Outside, the stars shone faintly, scattered across the black sky. Somewhere out there, a human ship waited, alone, silent, still carrying out a mission from a forgotten time. He didn't know what he would find, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no longer a rumor. It was real, and he was ready to uncover the truth no matter what it cost. The night he decided to follow the coordinates, the technician didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his small bed, staring at the glowing numbers written on the piece of paper. Those coordinates felt like a calling, like someone or something wanted him to come closer. He kept thinking about the voice, the signal, and the old engineer's warning. Every part of his mind told him to stop, but his heart refused. He wanted the truth more than anything. He packed his things, the receiver, his data drive, a few energy bars, and a portable power cell. There was no plan, no backup. He just knew he had to leave before anyone noticed. The small outpost had a few ships docked at the port. Most were cargo freighters or old scouting vessels, rusting from years of neglect. He needed something fast but quiet. After asking around casually, he met a trader who agreed to rent out an old survey shuttle. The man didn't ask too many questions, which made things easier. By evening, the technician was in the cockpit checking the systems. The ship was old, but it still worked. As the engines started humming, he felt a strange calmness wash over him. The stars outside blinked softly, and the dark stretch of space beyond looked endless. He entered the coordinates from the note into the navigation panel. The screen showed the destination, a small area deep within the Forbidden Zone, completely unmapped. He took a deep breath and pushed the thrusters forward. The ship lifted gently and glided out of the port, disappearing into the dark sky. Hours turned into days as he traveled through empty space. He rarely slept, staying awake to monitor the signal. It was growing stronger now, repeating every few hours with the same words: beacon active, mission intact. Sometimes when the signal was clear, he thought he could hear faint breathing in the background. It made him feel uneasy but also strangely connected, as if someone was still there waiting. On the 3rd day, he noticed something unusual. The navigation screen began to flicker, and the compass spun wildly. The ship's systems couldn't stabilize the coordinates. It was as if the region ahead was distorting everything: gravity, light, even time. He knew he was getting close. He took control manually, guiding the ship forward. Outside the window, the stars started to blur, bending and twisting into strange shapes. It felt like he was flying through a fog made of light. The sensors began picking up small fragments of metal floating in space. Some looked like pieces of old satellites, while others were completely unrecognizable. Then he saw it. At first, it was just a shadow, massive, silent, and almost invisible against the dark background. As he moved closer, the shape became clearer. It was a ship. Not alien, not mechanical junk, it was human-made. The hull was burned and covered in cracks, but the structure was still strong. And on its side, barely visible through the dust, were the faded letters, Helios 1. His hands trembled. After all the searching, all the sleepless nights, it was real. The lost ship existed. He slowly brought his shuttle closer, careful not to disturb anything. The massive vessel floated silently like a ghost frozen in time. There were no visible lights, no movement, but the beacon was still active. He could see the faint glow of its relay system blinking weakly near the tail section. He tried to establish a connection through his radio. Helios 1, this is an independent vessel responding to your signal. Do you read me? For a moment there was only static. Then a weak voice replied, so faint it was almost a whisper. Copy. Helios 1. Mission intact. His eyes widened. The same words, but now spoken directly to him. He quickly adjusted the frequency. This is not a recording. Who is speaking? The voice returned after a pause. This is Command Unit Helios. Crew status unknown. Environment unstable. Power critical. The transmission cut out. He stared at the console, heart pounding. Crew status unknown. Did that mean someone might still be alive inside? Or was he speaking to the ship's automated system? He decided to dock. It was risky, but he couldn't leave without knowing the truth. Using the manual controls, he aligned his shuttle with the main airlock of the Helios. The docking clamps connected with a heavy thud. For a long moment, he just sat there staring at the airlock door. It felt unreal. The ship had been missing for 40 years. No one had seen it since, and now he was about to step inside. He put on his oxygen suit, checked the pressure, and slowly opened the hatch. A burst of stale air rushed out, carrying the smell of metal and time. The corridor beyond was dark, silent, and cold. His flashlight beam revealed floating dust particles drifting weightlessly. Every sound echoed. The click of his boots on the metal floor, the hum of his breathing system, the low creak of the ship's frame as if it were still alive. The walls were covered in faded markings, and some panels had been ripped open. He moved deeper, passing control rooms filled with broken screens and scattered papers. Everything looked frozen in the middle of chaos. It felt like whatever had happened here, it had happened suddenly. In one of the control chambers, he found something that made him stop. A message log still glowing faintly on a cracked monitor. The date was from 40 years ago. The last recorded entry read, "Power failing. Unknown interference surrounding vessel. Crew instructed to maintain beacon. Awaiting extraction." He whispered the words aloud. Awaiting extraction. That explained why the beacon was still active. They had left it on, waiting for someone to find them. He tried to access more logs, but most were corrupted. As he moved toward the main bridge, the signal on his receiver grew stronger. It was no longer just a faint pulse, it was a continuous hum. The bridge door was jammed, but he managed to force it open. Inside, the room was filled with flickering lights. At the center stood the command console, still powered, its screens glowing dimly. He approached slowly, brushing off a layer of dust from the main control panel. The screen lit up with text. Mission Helios. Primary directive. Explore Forbidden Zone. Objective. Retrieve anomaly data. Crew status undetermined. Then another line appeared, something that hadn't been written 40 years ago. It was recent. External presence detected. Welcome. He froze. The words were responding to him. He looked around quickly, his flashlight sweeping the corners of the room. There was no one there, no movement, just silence. Then the console flickered again and a soft mechanical voice spoke through the speakers. Visitor identified. You have reached Helios 1. Mission status ongoing. He swallowed hard. Who are you? Command AI, Helios Unit Alpha, the voice replied. It was calm but tired, as if it had been speaking through centuries of static. What happened to the crew? He asked quietly. Crew attempted to exit the zone. Energy storms caused failure of life support. Beacon maintained as per directive. He looked at the screen. The words scrolled slowly, each one heavier than the last. The crew had perished, but the ship had continued its mission alone for decades, faithfully repeating its orders, waiting for someone to come. Why are you still here? He asked softly. Mission incomplete. Anomaly remains unstable. Containment required, he frowned. What anomaly? The lights on the console dimmed and a holographic map flickered to life. It showed a dark area ahead of the ship, a swirling distortion like a storm made of light and shadow. "The Forbidden Zone's heart. That's what you were studying?" he whispered. "Affirmative," the AI said. "Energy readings beyond known physics. Crew attempted direct observation. Result, containment breach. Extraction failed." He felt a chill run through him. The Forbidden Zone wasn't just empty space. It was alive, or at least something inside it was. Before he could ask more, the ship began to shake slightly. The lights flickered. The AI's voice grew softer. Energy surge detected. Anomaly expanding. He turned toward the window. Far in the distance, the darkness was shifting, like waves rippling through space. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. He quickly backed away, heading for the airlock. But just before he left, the AI spoke again. "You must relay this data. Humanity must not return here." Then the lights went out completely. He hurried back to his shuttle, heart racing. Once he was safely inside, he disconnected the docking clamps and pulled away from the ship. Outside, the Helios floated silently, its beacon still blinking. As he set a course back toward safer space, he looked one last time through the viewport. The massive ship looked peaceful now, drifting near the swirling darkness of the Forbidden Zone. He didn't know if anyone would believe him, but he knew the truth. Helios 1 had never vanished by accident. It had gone exactly where it was told to go, and even after its crew was gone, it had kept doing its duty. He watched as the beacon blinked again one final time, before fading into the distance. The signal that had started as a rumor was no longer a mystery. It was proof of human courage, sacrifice, and the silent promise to never stop exploring no matter the cost. He didn't sleep for 2 days after leaving the Helios 1. The image of that ship floating near the strange light kept replaying in his mind. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the blinking beacon and heard the faint, tired voice of the ship's AI repeating its last words. "Humanity must not return here." Those words hit deep. They weren't just a warning. They were almost like a plea. It was as if the Helios had seen something beyond human understanding, something that should never be disturbed again. As his small shuttle drifted away from the zone, he finally tried to rest. The stars outside were calm again. No flickering distortions, no strange radio noises, just silence and emptiness. For the first time in days, the silence felt peaceful, but peace never lasts long in deep space. When he woke up, his system screen was flashing. The communication radar had picked up multiple signals, unidentified ships approaching fast. His heart jumped. He tried to scan them, but the system lagged. The data showed encrypted codes. These weren't normal civilian ships. Then a voice came through his radio, stern, official, and commanding. "Unidentified vessel, you are in restricted space. Power down your engines and prepare for inspection." He froze. It was the Interstellar Command. Somehow they had found him. He quickly thought of what to do. If they discovered what he had found, if they got their hands on the Helios data, they might bury it again just like before. The truth would vanish all over again. He turned off his transponder and shut down the main power. His ship went dark. He was now floating silently, hoping they wouldn't detect him. Outside the window, he could see 3 large ships passing through the sector, scanning with bright blue lights. Their engines glowed like fire against the black sky. He held his breath as the nearest one came dangerously close. The scanners passed over his small shuttle, but by some luck, or maybe fate, they didn't notice him. When they moved away, he exhaled deeply, sweat dripping down his forehead. He didn't wait another second. He powered up the engines and changed his course, heading toward the neutral zone, an area free from government control. He knew he couldn't go back to his station. Someone had leaked his activity, maybe the trader who rented him the ship, or maybe someone had been tracking the Helios signal too. It didn't matter now. What mattered was protecting the data. He took out the drive containing the logs from Helios 1, the proof of what he saw, what he heard, and the coordinates of the Forbidden Zone. That drive was his only weapon, and also the only truth the galaxy needed to hear. For hours he stayed quiet, flying low under radar. His mind was spinning. He kept thinking, why would they want to hide the Helios mission? If it was just a failed expedition, they could have told the world. But instead, they sealed every record, erased every trace, and marked the area as forbidden. That meant only one thing. Whatever Helios found out there, it was never meant to be known. By the second day, his ship's fuel was running low. He had to find a place to land. He spotted an old refueling station orbiting a dead moon. It looked abandoned, but his scanner detected faint power signatures. He carefully approached, docking the ship at the side port. The airlock opened with a rusty hiss and he stepped inside. The place was empty, covered in dust and quiet hums of forgotten machines. He found a small terminal still running and used it to send an encrypted message to an old friend, a former news investigator known for exposing government secrets. He didn't share everything, only a small part of the data, just enough to prove it was real. Then he sent a short note. "If I don't contact you in 24 hours, release this to the networks." After sending the message, he sat there for a long time, staring at the empty room. The walls were cold, but his thoughts burned with questions. He had come so far, crossed into forbidden space, seen something that defied logic, and now he was being hunted because of it. He remembered the voice of the Helios AI again, that faint, human-like tone saying, "Mission ongoing." It felt less like a machine and more like a lost soul, trapped in endless duty. What if the ship was more than metal and code? What if it had become something alive, something touched by the strange energy of the zone? He shook his head, trying to focus. He needed to survive first. He refueled his ship using what little energy the station could provide, then prepared to leave. But as he powered up, something unexpected happened. The ship's receiver picked up the Helios signal again. It was impossible. He had left the zone behind days ago, yet the signal was clear, repeating the same words. "Beacon active. Mission intact." He stared at the monitor, his heart racing. Was the ship still transmitting? Or was the zone expanding? He quickly traced the signal's direction. It wasn't coming from behind him. It was ahead. That didn't make sense. There couldn't be two signals unless something or someone had moved the beacon. He adjusted the coordinates and engaged the engines. The shuttle trembled slightly as it turned toward the new direction. He didn't know what he'd find, but he couldn't ignore it. Hours later, he entered a dark region filled with strange debris, shattered satellites, frozen drones, and broken hull fragments. It was like a graveyard of lost machines. In the middle of it floated a small capsule glowing faintly. His sensors identified the energy signature immediately. It matched the Helios beacon. He approached slowly, carefully bringing the ship close. The capsule was round, made of the same alloy as the Helios hull. But it wasn't drifting randomly. It was moving with purpose, as if controlled. He activated the docking arm and pulled it inside. Once it was secure, he opened the chamber door. The capsule was covered in thin layers of frost, but the beacon light was pulsing strong. He connected it to his system, and the screen lit up. "Helios Mission Fragment 12 activated." He blinked. "Fragment 12? He whispered. The display continued, showing a file. When he opened it, a video started to play. The screen showed a recording from the Helios bridge, its crew alive and working. Their faces were tense but calm. The captain spoke clearly into the camera. "If anyone finds this message," the captain said, "know that we discovered something far beyond what our minds can hold. The zone is not a void, it's a threshold. It reacts to consciousness, to thought, to life itself. We tried to study it, but it started studying us." The technician leaned closer, unable to breathe. The captain's voice grew weaker. "We are sending out data fragments. If you find one, do not come closer. The zone remembers those who enter." The video ended suddenly. He sat frozen for a moment, staring at the blank screen. The words echoed in his head. "The zone remembers those who enter." He began to understand now. The zone wasn't just space. It was something alive, something aware, and by stepping into it, he had marked himself. The lights in his shuttle flickered. The power levels dropped for a second, then returned to normal. He checked the systems, nothing was wrong, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone anymore. He quickly copied the video into his main drive and disconnected the capsule. Then he powered up his engines and set a course for the nearest communication array. He had to upload this data before anyone or anything stopped him. As the shuttle accelerated, the stars ahead began to blur again. The signal from the Helios started fading, but the memory of that place, of the silent ship and the glowing zone, remained burned in his mind. For the first time, he wasn't afraid anymore. He knew what he had to do. The truth had to reach the world no matter the cost. But somewhere deep in the darkness behind him, the Helios beacon blinked once more. Slow, steady, and alive. Almost as if it was watching him leave. When he finally reached the edge of the neutral zone, he could see the distant lights of civilization blinking faintly against the black sky. For the first time in many days, the emptiness of space felt lighter, but deep down, he knew the danger wasn't over. He carried something powerful. Proof of the Helios mission, the captain's final words, and evidence that the Forbidden Zone wasn't just a rumor. It was real, alive, watching. He opened his ship's control panel and checked the drive once more. The video fragment was intact. The data logs from the Helios AI were also safe. Everything he needed to expose the truth was there. But what haunted him was the last line of the captain's message. The zone remembers those who enter. He looked at his reflection in the cockpit glass. His eyes were tired, his face pale. Maybe it was the sleepless nights, or maybe the zone had changed something inside him. Sometimes he thought he could still hear faint whispers through the static of the ship's radio, like echoes that didn't belong to space. He shook off the thought and focused on his next move. He couldn't go directly to any authority. They'd silence him before he even spoke. He had to contact his friend again, the investigative journalist who had received his earlier message. He opened a secure channel and transmitted a short code. Seconds later, the reply came. A calm voice spoke through the static. "You made it out. Are you safe?" He sighed in relief. "For now. I have something the world needs to see." The voice replied, "Then bring it in person. Don't transmit anything over the network. You're being watched." He froze. "Watched? How?" There was a pause. "Command ships have been scanning every relay station near the zone. They know someone went in. They just don't know it's you yet. Get to safe space and stay invisible." The connection cut off before he could reply. He leaned back, heart pounding. So they did know. Someone had seen his ship entering the zone. That meant time was running out. He adjusted his course toward a small trade colony on the outer rim, a place where people minded their own business. He could meet his contact there and hand over the data quietly. It would be the safest way to tell the truth. Hours passed as his ship drifted through quiet space. He tried to stay calm, but every sound, every flicker on the radar made him tense. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was following him. When he checked the radar again, he saw a faint signal trailing him. No transponder, no ID, just a shadow. He tried to ignore it at first, thinking it could be debris or a glitch, but the signal stayed with him, always keeping the same distance as if watching. He switched off the main lights and flew silently, changing course several times. The shadow followed every turn. Finally, he activated the rear cameras, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Floating behind him at a distance was a faint, glowing shape, like a ship, but distorted. It shimmered in and out of visibility, almost transparent, surrounded by soft blue light. He knew that glow. It was the same light that surrounded the Forbidden Zone. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." He pushed the engines to full power, trying to outrun it. The ship rattled, alarms beeped, but he didn't care. The glowing shape kept following, silent and patient. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. The radar went clear. The signal was gone. He sat frozen for a long time, staring at the empty screen. Was it real? Or was the zone somehow still connected to him, haunting him through memory? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. He had to deliver the data no matter what. After 2 days of flying nonstop, he finally reached the trade colony. It was a rough, crowded place built on a rocky moon where people came to disappear. The air was thick with the smell of metal and oil. He landed his ship in one of the lower docks, wearing a hooded jacket to hide his face. He carried the data drive close to his chest, hidden under his coat. Inside the colony, the lights were dim and the crowd moved like shadows. He spotted his contact in a small corner cafe, a middle-aged man with a tired but sharp look in his eyes. When their eyes met, the man gave a small nod. "You brought it?" he asked quietly. "Yes," he said, sitting down. "Everything. The ship, the captain's message, the proof. The world needs to know what the zone really is." The man leaned forward. "Do you have any idea what they'll do to you if this gets out?" "I don't care," he said softly. They can silence me, but not the truth. The man smiled faintly. Spoken like a real human. He pulled out a small terminal and connected the drive. The holographic screen lit up, showing the image of the Helios bridge. The journalist watched in silence as the captain's final message played, his expression changing from disbelief to awe. When the video ended, there was silence between them. After a long moment, the man said, "You weren't lying. This changes everything." He nodded. "People deserve to know that we lost more than a ship out there. We lost part of ourselves, and if that zone expands, it could reach us someday." The man looked up slowly. "Then we tell everyone together," he agreed. For the first time in weeks, he felt something close to hope. But just as the man began to copy the data, the lights in the cafe flickered. A low hum filled the air. The holographic screens on every table glitched. The man looked up sharply. "What's happening?" Before he could answer, the power went out completely. The entire colony fell into silence. Only emergency lights glowed red across the walls. Then through the window they saw it. A faint blue shimmer spreading across the sky outside the colony dome. The same light, the same glow, the zone. It couldn't be possible. The forbidden zone was light years away. But somehow that same energy was here, spreading like mist. Panic broke out in the streets. People ran, shouting, trying to contact the control tower. But every communication system was dead. The hum grew louder. He looked at the man and said in a low voice, "It followed me." The man's face turned pale. "You brought it here?" He didn't answer. He didn't know how. Maybe the capsule he had found was more than a message. Maybe it was a link, a seed of whatever lived inside that zone. The ground shook slightly. Lights flickered again. Through the windows he could see strange waves of energy moving through the atmosphere, bending light, warping metal. He grabbed the drive and ran toward the docking bay. The journalist followed. "What are you doing?" "I have to get it away from here," he shouted. "If the zone spreads, it'll destroy everything." They reached the dock as alarms blared. People were fleeing in all directions. He jumped into his ship, activating the engines. The man handed him a small disk, the backup copy of the data. "Take it," he said. "No matter what happens, someone has to know." He nodded, clutching the disk tightly. "If I don't make it back, tell them the Helios warned us." Then he launched the ship, flying out of the colony's dome just as blue light flooded the lower levels. Outside, the sight was terrifying. The glow spread like a slow-moving wave, swallowing everything in its path. The stars around it shimmered unnaturally as if bending under invisible pressure. He flew higher, away from the moon, but the light followed him, stretching, twisting, reaching. His ship's systems began to glitch again. The same static filled the speakers, and then through the noise came a familiar voice. "Beacon active. Mission intact." It was the Helios AI. He stared at the console in disbelief. The same tone, the same voice echoing across the systems. "How are you here?" he whispered. The AI's voice replied, calm and distant. "Mission continuation detected. New vector established." He realized what it meant. The zone wasn't just a place, it was spreading through the data itself. Through the signal. Through him. He took one last look at the disk in his hand. Maybe the data was the key to stopping it. Or maybe it was the reason it kept coming. Either way, he couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. He opened the airlock and placed the disk inside an emergency pod. He entered random coordinates, far away, deep into uncharted space. Then with a silent prayer, he launched it. The pod shot away like a star, disappearing into the dark. The AI spoke again, softer this time. "Human mission complete?" He looked out the window, seeing the glow getting closer, brighter, almost beautiful. "Maybe," he whispered, "maybe it's time someone ended it." The light swallowed his ship completely. Moments later, the colony's sensors detected a massive energy surge. Then silence. The next morning, all systems returned to normal. The strange blue glow faded as if it had never existed. But in the deep dark of space, far beyond any star, a small pod drifted silently, carrying the final message of the Helios mission. A message that waited, patiently, for someone brave enough to find it again. And so, the rumors began once more. Whispers of a lost ship in the forbidden zone. A myth, or perhaps existence.